Hello and welcome to Codified Launch. My name is Gaurang Dave and thank you so much for joining me in this video. I hope you guys are doing well. In the previous video, we covered some fundamental basics of how web works, how internet works, and what it is to be a web developer. In this video, we are going to continue our journey and learn how to create a web page. I'm super excited for this. So without any delays, let's get started. So in the last video, we saw that whenever you visit a website, we follow a client-server mechanism. The client sends a request to the server and server responds with a bunch of files to the client. And what are those files? So the code files that create this website mainly consist of three things, which are the building blocks of a website. One is HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, CSS, cascading style sheets, and JavaScript, right? So let's dig in a little bit deeper. So what is HTML? So first of all, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So from the name itself, you know it's not a programming language, but it's rather a markup language. And what a markup language does is the language defines the content along with certain symbols in the content, telling the browser or any interpreter of the language on how you should structure this language. So basically it tells the browser how to structure the content, structure the images, structure the links in the page, right? CSS, which stands for cascading style sheets. Basically, again, CSS is not a programming language, but it's a style sheet language. So what does a CSS do? It tells a browser on how should the page look. So HTML created the structure, CSS defines how should it look. So you can kind of relate it to maybe HTML are the bricks which creates the structure and CSS is the paint that says, okay, how should it look, right? And finally, JS, which stands for JavaScript. So first of all, JavaScript is not related to Java. They are completely different and they are only similar to each other as a flower is similar to a cauliflower. They sound similar, but they are way different from each other. Not that one is better than other. They both have their own utilities. They both are amazing programming languages, but other than the name or a part of name, they don't share anything else. So like I said, JavaScript is a programming language that defines how a page behaves. So we have the structure, we have the looks, and now we have the behavior. So whenever you see a page reacting to something you did on the page, whether you clicked on something, whether you hovered on something, chances are there is JavaScript acting in background. So that was a very brief introduction. I'm going to cover these technologies in more detail as we go forward. But today we are going to start with HTML. So no more slides, no more PPTs, no more theories. Let's build a web page. So we are going to start with HTML, and in order to create a web page, you don't need any special software. You don't need any special editors or anything to create a web page. You can simply create it in a notepad. So that's what we'll do. We'll create our first Hello World web page in a notepad. So open the folder in which you want to store this web page. Right click, click on new and select text document, right? And name it Hello World. Maybe we can have underscore in between .html, and make sure you delete the extension .txt from the file. We don't want the file to be txt. We want to save it as .html. And the Windows will say, hey, should we? Is it okay to change it? Yes. So if you have done it correctly, this is how it would look. If you see, this is my file name, helloworld.html, and the icon automatically changes to the browser icon that you have. Let me show you again. Yeah. See here, hello_world.html, and the icon is browser icon. right? So if you see your file like this, that means you have named it and created it correctly. If you don't see it, if you still see the text pad icon, what you can do is in your Windows Explorer, go to View. So let me go to View, and in your View options, if you see, there is a File Name Extensions checkbox. Make sure this checkbox is selected so that you can see the file names. In case if this checkbox is not selected, then you will not see the extension. So your file would still be helloworld.html.txt, right? And so you want to make sure your file name extensions are visible, and then you remove the .txt from the file name. So we created the hello world HTML. It looks like a Chrome, because my default browser is Chrome, it shows the Chrome icon. If I double click it, it opens the web page. If you see here, there is a path to it. Don't worry if your path is different, ignore this part. I can cover this in later videos. But if you see this, the path should end with your file name over here. But we just created the file name, there's no content, so it's blank. Okay, let's create the content. Like I said, we don't need any special editors or anything to create this. So we'll just open it in Notepad. And let me see if I can zoom in this a bit. By the way, before I forget, I'm going to link all the code that I write in this video. I'm going to link it in the description. I'm going to create a GitHub repo, and with all the code files, you can download it and directly run that if it doesn't work for you right now. And any link that I use, any APIs that I use in this video, I'm going to link everything in the description. So maybe I forget to tell you that while making this video, but do check out the description. There'll be additional details over there. All right. So first, let's just create this web page. And once we run it, I'll explain it to you. Okay. So we'll start with doc type HTML. So first we'll create a hello world application, and then I'll explain what this application does. So you must be thinking, what is this hello world? Why does he keep saying hello world? So in software engineering, whenever you learn any new programming language, right? Any new frameworks, anything new, we try and create a hello world application. So what hello world means is you simply print the text hello world using that programming language or using that framework or using that application. It's just a quick and easy way to get your hands dirty with some programming language basics. I created this application, and I already see I had a typo here. This is what I want. So now if we refresh our browsers, ta-da! There you go, hello world. You see this is a web page. We have opened it in Chrome browser, and it says hello world. That's it. So how does this work? Let's go through it, right? So what we did here is we created our HTML page, right? Like I said, HTML is a markup language which uses special symbols to tell the browser how to structure the language, right? So in case of HTML, these symbols are nothing but HTML elements. So each HTML element, it starts with a less than sign. Then there is the element name and a greater than sign. So this is one HTML tag, and this is the closing HTML tag. So each HTML tag has an opening tag and a closing tag, and it has content in between. I'll take my words back. Not all tags will have opening and closing, but most of them will have an opening tag, a closing tag, and a content tag. So as you can see, the opening tag has just the less than sign, the greater than sign, and the tag name in between, and the closing tag has the less than sign, a slash, the tag name, and the closing sign. So in this case, what did we do here? So we first created a doc type tag. which basically tells the browser that this document that you're going to render is a HTML document. Now, originally, this doc type had links to the actual definition of the document. That was in like older internet days when there wasn't any clear definition of what HTML should be. There wasn't a standardized definition. But nowadays, things have changed. Things have improved a lot. So there's one standardized definition on what HTML specs are, what are the tags that we should support, how these tags should behave, and everything is pretty much standardized. So this is just something, a historic artifact that we add to our HTML file, right? Second, let me clear this. Yeah. Second one is the HTML tag. So this is the root of the page, right? The root HTML of the page. So everything between two HTML tags is what is rendered in your page, right? Next, we declare a head tag. So again, it's the same thing. There is an opening bracket. There is a tag name. There is a closing bracket. And to end the tag, there is an opening bracket. There is a slash and the tag name and closing bracket. So basically, the header tag is currently empty because we haven't added anything. We just wanted to do hello world application. But anything that you want to define in the HTML that shouldn't be displayed with the content, it goes in the head tag. So in the next example, we will see this in more detail, but head basically contains everything that you don't want to be displayed. Next is the body. So the body is the main part of a HTML page. The body, everything in the body is what gets rendered in the HTML page, right? So again, it's the same thing. We have an opening body tag or body element. We can use these interchangeably. And we have a closing body tag, right? And in between, we have this h1 tags. So now remember, I kept saying that in HTML, in a markup language, we use special elements and symbols to structure the content. So let's take an example of that. So let's say for now, I remove this thing and I just say hello world. So you see right now, the hello world is like bold and large. You can see it. Now, if we refresh the page, a new change would take into effect. And if you see, the hello world is now smaller, right? To do a direct comparison, we can add both. We can say h1 hello world h1. Right, let's refresh. So now if you see, one hello world which wasn't surrounded by h1 is smaller, and second hello world which was surrounded by h1 is larger and bold. Why is that? So here we are telling the browser that this is a regular text. Right? Don't structure it in a special way. Structure it in the default way that a browser would do. But here we are saying, hey, this is a special hello world. Okay, because we are surrounding it with these two elements. So the h1 element is the header element, the highest level of header element. And it tells the browser that this is the most important text, so display it in the most important way. So in this case, since it's h1, it displays it like bold and large. It's the header one. You can compare it with, if you open a Word file, let's see. So if you do a Word file, if you see, we have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, right? So this h1 is nothing but heading 1, which is the largest, the main heading of your document. Ideally, there should be only one main heading of the document, and anything after that should be h2, h3, h4, and so on. So this is how we are structuring. This is how we are using HTML elements to structure the content. Okay. And as with all the other tags, there is an opening h1 tag and there is a closing h1 tag. So you are opening the tag, placing the content, and closing the tag, and then HTML structures it the way it does. So this was your first ever Hello World application. Exciting? Interesting? I hope so. So this is good. Now we got our hands dirty. I hope even your web page is running as expected. Let's go through all the tags that HTML supports, right? Let's go through one by one each section and try and do that. But before we do that, we used WordPad for this, which was good, just to show that we can do that. But instead of that, we should be using IDEs. So what is the IDE? So IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Basically, IDEs are very special editors that you use to write your code. And they have advantage over notepads, a lot of advantage over notepad. One, it comes with a lot of features to autocomplete your code. So any engineer, any software developer in world, they rarely remember each and every syntax, each and every detail of the code, right? Like I don't remember all the HTML tags that are out there. So IDEs help in this case. They help in auto-completing, they help in suggestions. Second, if you see this over here, it's not too user-friendly to read. This is just a simple hello world application. Normally, our web pages are like hundreds of lines of HTML tags, and it's very difficult to parse through the web page while coding in a notepad. So IDEs have special color-coded, specially indented HTML tags so that you can easily search, easily surf through them. Right. Third, they have special extensions that will make your web development journey very easy. So which IDE should we use? So the one I use is called Visual Studio Code. It's a free open source IDE by Microsoft, and you can download it for Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever your operating system is. And I'll do a separate video with details on how to set up this IDE. But for now, you can just install it, and I'll just show you two extensions that are useful for us for now. As we go into details, as we learn CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, we'll add more extensions that will make our life easier, right? So go to this link, it's in the description, download it and install it. You can pause the video, and then once you have installed it, once you open the IDE, continue the video and I'll show you the extensions to use. So open the IDE, go to open folders, and then go to the folder where we created your hello world HTML file, and you should be able to open hello world.html in the IDE. It should look something like this. Right? Now I was talking about extensions, right? So extensions are like plugins for your IDE that helps you with the development. So let's install two extensions. One is, if you go here, there is a extension marketplace over here. So click on that and search for live server. So there should be a live server extension by Ritwik Day, I guess. Yeah. By this guy, around 19 million installation at the time of this video. And okay, I'll uninstall it for you. Okay, it's a dependency, but basically there should be an install button somewhere over here. Just install the extension, right? Second is HTML preview. Search for HTML preview. And there's an extension by Thomas Hakon Townsend. I really hope I'm not butchering the names, but Thomas Hakon Townsend, around 1,690,000 installs at the time of this video, and install that. So the live server extension will help us host our web page on a live server in VSCode. So we can also do it without the live server, but then live server comes with certain features which I'll show. And second, the HTML preview will generate the preview of the HTML we are creating right in the VS Code. So we don't have to switch between browser window and VS Code window to see how our HTML page looks. So it makes development real fast. So after you have installed both the extensions, make sure you might have to reload the VS Code. And after you do that, if you if you type Control Shift V, or if you click on this button over here, right, it looks like it says preview. If you click on that button, it shows the preview of your page on the right. So there's the first hello world, there's the second hello world. Awesome. Now, right, so now we can code our HTML page on the left, and we can preview the HTML page on the right. We have one extension, preview, working. In order to try the second extension, let me disable my cam for a second. And if you see on the lower right corner, you will see this new extension called Go Live, right? So if you click on that, it will start a local dev server on your machine, and it will basically host your any pages that you create over there in on this server. So the advantage there is it auto reloads your page whenever you make the changes, and you'll get to see how your page might behave on an actual server. You can also view the page. Since these are static pages, you can also just quickly view them without the server, but it's a nice to have feature. So let's try that. Let's click on Go Live. It's starting, and it automatically opens your page. You'll see that our original HTML page and the page we open with the server, the path for those are different, right? And that is because the original one, right, we were directly opening a HTML file in the browser, and for the second one, if you see the path, right, here we are actually opening a file hosted on a server. So if you see the path, it has an IP address 127.0.0.1:5500. In your case, it could be this 5500 could be something else. It could be a different port number, and then the file name. So what is this? So this 127.0.0.1, this is your local host. So local host is basically your own machine. You can also do this instead of 127. You can also do localhost, and it just works perfect. So basically, your computer knows localhost and 127.0.0.1. Both of oopsie daisies. I didn't type. Yeah. They both point to your own computer. So it says, okay, this IP address is this computer, and your file is hosted on port 5500 on this computer. So it's like a real server that we talked about, right? So, and the advantage here is, if you, let's say, if I make some changes here, if I say, instead of hello world, if I do aloha world. So you see on your right, your preview also changes. But if you go to web page, when the web page changes to aloha world, it automatically updates the web page for you. So there are some cases where we want to see the web page over here. In some cases, we want to see the preview over there. So hopefully these both extensions are installed. If you have any issues setting up this extension, please leave me a comment, and I'll try to provide more clearer directions with screenshots and all to help you set it up. And I might also create a different video fully explaining other extensions that are useful in VS Code for web development. So let's get started. Let's go back here. Now we have hello world that we tried, but for the next section where we are going to go through all the HTML tags, we are going to create a new file called index.html. So why index.html, right? Basically, index.html is defined as a default web page or a home page of a web application. So in modern web, most of the web applications that you see, they will have an index.html file. So even though we are not creating a large web application over here, it's good to follow best practices, right? Yeah, let's start with the first tag that we remember. So first we need to tell the browser that, hey, this is a HTML document, nothing new here. Next we'll define our root element HTML. Again, nothing new here. Next, we'll define the head element. So anything that is not displayed with the content should go into the head element. And next, we'll define a body element. So with just these tags, our HTML page is structurally correct. So each HTML page should have a doc type. It should have the root element. It should have the head. It should have the body. If you see, the preview is working. Oh, this is pointing to the wrong one. So change it to index.html. And if you see, this is working. Right, since we have no content over here, it doesn't display anything. What do we have to configure here, right? What kind of details do we add in a page that we don't want to display? So it could be a lot of content. So it could be metadata related to page. So metadata could be keywords for the page, description, right? Character sets defined in the page. It could be links to JavaScript files that we want to load in the page. It could be linked to CSS files. So all these file paths, file names, we don't want to display in our content. We want the browser to load them in the background and then render it with the page. It could also be title of the page. So that's what we'll start with. Let's start with title. So as the name suggests, the element name is title. So we created a title opening element. We added a title closing element. And what should be the title of the page? So basically, title is something that displays on your browser tab, and it also gets it's also suggested as a bookmark name. So it should be short and simple that describes the page. So let's just say my first web page. Right? You save it. Unfortunately, the preview doesn't display the title here, but if you go to the browser, and if you go to the top here, you see it shows my first web page over here. So this is our page's title. Now, if you try to bookmark this page, if you do Ctrl D, or if you even do click the bookmark favorite icon over here, it says, hey, save this bookmark as my first web page. So it's good to have a friendly, easy to remember title. And now you can see what are the titles of other pages, right? You can see, hey, Visual Studio Code website has the title Visual Studio Code. If we go to google.com, the title is Google, right? Let's go to youtube.com. The title is YouTube, right? So different websites have different titles, and these titles are more meaningful to the page, especially when you try to bookmark it, when you try to save it. Right, so we added the title. Next we can add, like I said, character set for the page. So how do we add that? We create a meta tag. We say character set UTF-8. Now this is something new, right? We haven't seen anything like this before. So what's different here? So we introduced a new tag called meta tag. Basically in the headers, there can be multiple meta tags, each defining a different metadata for the page. So metadata for the page is like info related to the page that doesn't need to be rendered in the page, but it helps either the browser render the page or any other service that integrates with the page, right? So in this case, we are saying, hey, metadata, here we are defining it as character set. So till now, all the HTML elements we saw, we never defined anything in between. So here we are adding this new thing. So this HTML elements, as with all the HTML elements, has an attribute called character set, right? And it says the character set is UTF-8. So what it basically says that this page supports UTF-8 characters, which means it supports almost all the characters in any human language possible. So UTF-8 is like the industry standard character set, and which has characters for, let's say, English, Hindi, Japanese, Chinese, all the different languages. And the definition basically helps the browser understand the characters and render them correctly. So here we are saying, hey, for this particular page, please support all the languages, all the characters, right? Another new thing that you see over here is we do not have a closing tag. There is no closing tag. So like I said earlier, most of the HTML elements will have an opening tag, a content and a closing tag. But there are some HTML elements which will just have opening tag but no closing tag and not even content. Instead of that, it will have attributes that define what the tag is about, like in this case. Next is we'll add another meta tag, and this time we'll add it a name and we'll call it VR, and we are describing this page. So what does a description meta tag give? So here we are saying that this metadata is the description of the page and content actually describes the page. So you can say my first web page, hello world, learning HTML, whatever, right? So the use case here is sometimes search engines like Google and Bing, right? They use the meta tag to identify what the web page is about, right? So the more accurate this meta tag is, the more accurately the search engine knows that what the web page is about. And whenever searches for, let's say, first web page, Google knows, hey, this web page had details regarding first web page. Let me give this link to the user. So it's used for that. It's used for SEO optimization, which stands for search engine optimization, right? Next is, so let's go with viewport, right? So the name is, like I said, viewport. And before I go through this, I'm going to quickly show you something very interesting in web development. For the sake of this, let's add a body tag here like we did last time. Hello world. Okay. So if you see our browser, hello world is rendered as expected, right? It's index.html and hello world. Now, what is the viewport? So viewport basically defines the area in which your page is displayed. So if you see right now, everything from this upper left corner near the edge to the lower right corner is your viewport, right, on your desktop. Now, in case if your page is long, if you have a lot of details, the browser adds scroll bars to extend your viewport. You can scroll down, you go to the page, right? That is your page's viewport. Now let's say if we go to inspect. So before we go that, let's talk about developer tools. Sorry, I've been jumping around, but let's talk about developer tools here. So basically all modern browsers, they support developer tools for web development. And what they are is, if you right click on any web page and select inspect, it opens this small window below you that basically is your browser's developer tools. And it has many details. So if you see, this is Chrome browser, by the way. If you see on the left, we have elements, we have console, we have recorder, we have sources, we have network, performance, memory, application. Let's not worry about all this. Okay, let's worry about few things first. So let's say if you click on elements, which is like the first one over here, if you see here, it shows your DOM elements, if it shows your web page elements, right? So if you open them at a time, hey, look what we defined over there: title, character set, description. If you open the body, you'll see hello world. You might see something like, oh, code injected by live server, but ignore that. It's something that our live server on VSCode injected. We can ignore that safely, right? So the reason I wanted to introduce this is there's one more very useful developer tool over here. So on your left corner, you see this icon that looks like a phone or a tablet. If you click that, right, it renders your page the way it would look on a phone or a tablet. So here it says, hey, the dimensions are responsive. So if you click this drop down, you'll see that, oh, we we can basically select any of these devices and it will show us how our web page will look in this device, right? So let's try iPhone 12 Pro. Let's try that. So you click this, select iPhone 12 Pro, and doesn't look good, right? It doesn't look as authentic as it does on our desktop. And the reason for that is the way the mobile browsers render our pages. They first render the page in a bigger viewport. So they see how the page looks in a bigger viewport and they shrink it down and show it on the mobile. The reason for that is not all websites, they support mobile view, right? Not all websites are responsive that they look beautiful even in the narrower mobile view. So in order to make sure that websites work as they intended, the mobile browsers do that so that users can still use the website by zooming in, but the website performance or website functionality doesn't get affected. So it looks very weird over here. So how do we fix that? That's where viewport comes, right? So here we want to give additional details related to viewport. So we'll say, hey, for this viewport, I want width equal to device width, right? So you see this, it automatically refreshed the page and now you see it's a lot better than before. So we are saying the viewport width should be same as device width and render our page based on that, not based on a bigger viewport. So that works. And we can add one more setting over here. We can say initial scale equal to 1.0. So what we are saying is that we can control how much the website is zoomed when it first renders without any user. This is what viewport does. So next, if you see, let's go back to our web page. Let's close the mobile view because we want to work on the regular view. Now if you see, if you compare all the tabs that we have open over here, except the hello world one, you'll see something different. Each tab has a unique icon linked to it. If you see, VSCode has VSCode icon, Google has Google icon, document has document icon, slides has Google slide icon. So those icons are known as favicons. And what does favicon? Favicon stands for basically favorite icon, and we need to define them in order to show that icon on our web page. So how do we do that? So let me share with you this link. Right? There's this website. Again, it's in the description. It generates these favicons for you. There are very specific requirements for all the favicons, and it generates these favicons for you. So let's create. We are going to create one with our YouTube profile picture. You upload the picture. It actually generates the favicon. It shows how it looks in different scenarios. So see over here, it shows how it looks in the tab. It shows how it looks in Google search, how it looks on mobile, right? How it would look on iOS, right? If you save the page on iOS, then there are some maybe ads. Oops. Why can't I find my cursor? Okay, yeah. How it looks on Android when you save the page, how it looks on Windows Metro, things like that, right? So once you see that, hey, my favicon is good, I'm satisfied, you click on generate your favorite favicons. You're going to download, it's going to generate all the favicons for us. We are going to download it. And favicon package, okay. So I already downloaded it once, let's do it again. Right. Let me share it over here. If you see, it created this bunch of favicons for me, different sizes, different configuration based on different operating system requirements, different use cases. So what we'll do is we are going to copy this and open VSCode, create a new folder, icons, and we are going to, why can't I paste it here? Let's see, we are going to paste it here. Okay, so you'll have all your favicons over here. Now, if we see the web page again, it also tells us how do we use them. That's what we'll do. We'll simply copy this HTML, go to our HTML description and paste it over here. Now let's open our browser and see how it looks. Oh, it doesn't load. Why? So if you see the console, it says 404 not found. Let me zoom in. We went to our developer tools, right? And it says, hey, we couldn't find the manifest file. If you go to network tools, you'll see here, it didn't find the manifest file. Why is that? So when this page rendered, right, the browser went through our metadata and so, hey, viewpoint is this. It came across this link tag, right? So what this link tag does is it links whatever file content or the resource you are defined in this href attribute, and it tells the relationship of that resource to this page, right? So this is a new HTML element that we are adding. Again, it's HTML element that doesn't have a closing tag and that doesn't have a content, but it's just an HTML element with attributes. And if you see the HTML elements that doesn't have a closing tag, we have this in the end. It has a self-closing tag. So here we are saying that, hey, this is the resource, and the way it is related to the pages, it's this page's Apple Touch icon. So whenever this page is rendered in an Apple iPhone, the Safari recognizes this link tag and uses this icon as the icon for the app in the App Store. Same way here, we are saying, hey, this particular file is related to this page because it's this page's icon, right? Its type is image.png and this is its size. So it's same link tag, and we are defining different attributes and different relationships here, right? But the problem is it cannot find it, right? Because of the way we are importing it. So now if we do this, favicon, favicons, right? Because we have added it in the folder, we need to make sure we give the right path. So for all our icons, we are going to change it to its absolute path. And now if you see our web page, ta-da! You see, we have the icon, right? We have not deployed this page anywhere, but this icon would also be there in our search results. If we save this page as a PWA, which is an advanced topic called progressive web apps, we can also see the icon over there. We are going to cover all those details in future videos. But this is how we define those favicons. And you must be thinking, what the hell is this site manifest? Okay, so the site manifest is a file describing, it's a manifest file for this web page. And this is basically useful when you convert a web app into PWA. PWA stands for progressive web apps, and it gives all the web pages on mobile a very native app-like feel. Like I said, we are going to cover that in upcoming videos, so I don't want to get into details over here since we are still covering the basics. So we added all this, the tile color, MS application tile color, right? So this is again a meta tag, and this meta tag is used by Microsoft So tile color and everything, it's if you again convert this app into a progressive web app, it creates and save it to, let's say, Windows. It adds this web page as an app, right, on Microsoft Start menu, and it defines the tile color over here. So we are going to remove these because these two we don't need, right? We are going to remove these as well because we don't need it right now. Let's not confuse anything. But if you see, our favicon is still here. So this defines your meta tags and link tags in header. Now this is not the complete list. Other than that, you can also describe. You can also add CSS styles. You can also add JavaScript code and also import JavaScript files. You can also, there are also custom meta tags for, let's say, Twitter and Facebook. And like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is a good exhaustive list, but this is a good intro to what header tags are, right? And we are going to cover more meta tags, more elements in head as we go forward, as we go through those use cases. Now let's jump on to the HTML content. So all the elements and tags supported by the body. So now you will see that whatever elements we add in the body section, they will immediately be reflected in our web page, right? So this section actually defines what is displayed on your page, and the tags will define the structure on how they are displayed. So you already know H1 from the previous web page. It's the heading 1 tag, right? It's the most important, highest level heading over here. So let's just change this so that we can know, hello, I am H1, right? So normally you want to add only one H1 on your page, so you should only have the one highest level tag on your page, and you should always make sure you follow this pattern. The reason for that is again, search engine optimizations, right? So search engines look at H1 tag to see what would be the important headline for the page, and maybe try to use that as an indicator of how relevant this page is, or maybe display that in the search results. Also, it's good for accessibility. So whenever a person is using screen reader to go to the web page, these heading tags tell them what are the headers, what are the subheaders, etc., right? So always make sure you follow these best practices. So second one is H2. So it's again what do we say, second level heading. It's smaller than H2. Always make sure it's not hell, it's hello. Always make sure your H1s are always followed by H2. So any subheadings that you want to do, any second level headings that you want to add are indicated by H2. You can have multiple H2s. Similarly, you can also have H3, right? So any headings that follow after H2, right? They should be always nested after H2, and that are like the third level heading. Next we have paragraph tag. So the element P defines the paragraph tag, and there's one cool trick that you should know. So if you go and Google Lorem Ipsum, right? So there is this website called Lorem Ipsum generator, which generates this random text for you. So let's say you are creating a web page, or you are just practicing your HTML development, and you want some random text to create a paragraph, to see how it looks. You can go to this Lorem Ipsum generator and generate as much text as you want. If you see here, it generated 5 paragraphs, these many words, these many bytes of Lorem Ipsum. So we can just, let's say, copy 2 paragraphs. Oops, I should have done 1 paragraph at a time. So let me go back. Let me copy 1 paragraph, paste it. Let's go create a second paragraph, right? Copy, paste it. Again, I'm going to link all these funky generators and helpers in the description, so make sure you check that out. And if you see here, oopsie daisies, even on the web page, you see it's been, if I can keep it open for you guys, only then you'll be able to see. Yeah, if you see on the web page, we have 2 paragraphs over here, both with this lorem with some content. I have no idea what the content says, but it's just something I use if I want to just design a basic template to get an idea on how it would look, right? So that is the paragraph element. So as you can see, all these elements follow our original definition of HTML tags. It has an opening tag, followed by content, followed by closing tag. All this tag can also have additional attributes. So I can add an ID over here, heading 1, right? This ID attribute is unique. So each HTML element should have a unique HTML ID. And this ID attribute is then used by CSS, that is cascading style sheets, and JavaScript to uniquely identify the element and maybe apply styles or maybe apply listeners in JavaScript. Again, we are going to cover that in more detail, but just something to keep in mind. So whenever you are building your web page, whenever you are adding HTML elements, you want to think about adding IDs. IDs are not necessary, but if you think you need to access this element in CSS or in JavaScript, you might want to add an ID over here, right? It can also have an attribute called class. Again, this class refers to CSS, but basically this class defines certain styles in CSS, and when you add that class and you say class, whatever the class name is, those styles are applied to this particular tag. Again, like I said, we are going to cover this in detail in the next video, but this is just to give you some insight on how attributes work. Attributes are not just for tags that don't have closing tags, but attributes can also be added over here, right? So this is paragraph. Next, let's say we want to create lists, right? So there are 3 kind of lists that HTML supports. One is the ordered list. Right? So let's go. So ordered list you define by the HTML element called OL, right? OL stands for ordered list. So here we have the opening tag, here we have the closing tag, and then you want to define the list item, right? So that is defined by LI, list item. So the outer tag tells the browser that, hey, this is going to be ordered list, and then the inner tag list item is the first list item. So let's say HTML. Okay, let's make this a bit smarter. Let's add a paragraph saying technologies for web development. Not limited to this, but let's say HTML, right? Let's add another list item and call CSS. Let's add another list item, right? And say JS, right? So if you see on the right, it's automatically rendering everything. So if you see here in our HTML tag, we didn't add any numbers, but since we said this is going to be an ordered list, the browser automatically interpreted it and added numbers to our list. So it says technology for web development, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Now, same way, we have unordered list. And I just realized I didn't talk about what I'm doing here. So if you see, these things are known as comments. So any text that you want to add for your own info, but not necessarily related to the page, you can add that as a comment. So these comments are ignored by the browser. These comments are ignored by all the applications that look at that render the HTML page. And basically what they are helpful for is that as a developer, I can look at the comments and know what I'm doing here and why am I doing, right? So it's just an added utility for the developers to understand the code, but it doesn't affect your web page or anything, right? So yeah, if you see, I wrote lists over here, but it didn't do anything to the page. Same way, if I remove the list, right, the page won't change because the browser totally ignores anything between that. And the comment is defined by the opening bracket, exclamation mark, and 2 lines, followed by whatever comment you want. You can keep this as a multi-line comment, something like this, right? And it still doesn't affect your page in any way possible, right? It's totally ignored by browsers, by screen readers, by printers, maybe not by printers, but by browsers and screen readers, right? So after ordered list, we have unordered list. So what can we say? It's funny. Okay. Order in which I teach, right? That's unfortunately unordered list sometimes, but we are learning, we are improving, right? I write comments. I teach comments. Just what I did. I first wrote the comments and then taught comments. It's a great irony that that's the order in which I did, but this is an unordered list, right? So it's not in order. And if you see over here, again, we are not adding any bullets or anything to our content, but since it's an unordered list, the browser automatically adds bullets next to each list item that we created. And if you see the web page, it did the same thing, right? If you see technologies for web development, we have 1, 2, 3 orders in which I teach, bullet, not numbered, because it's an unordered list. It doesn't have numbers to it, right? The third type of list is definition list, or I think it's called description list. Basically, anytime you want to add an item and its description, you create this description list, right? So as the name says, it's description list, DL. So you can do DL, right? And then you add DT, which stands for description term. So in this case, let's add HTML. And then you add DD, which stands for description definition. Or yeah, I think description definition, but term and definition, right? So we say Hypertext Markup Language, right? Another DT, we say CSS, and we say its definition is cascading style sheets. So now if you see on the right, it doesn't scroll, but if you see over here, let me zoom in, our definition list, right? Let me remove this. Okay. Yeah, our definition list, it automatically indents the definition term on the left and the definition description on the right. Same way CSS and all the, again, we are not doing any kind of styling here, right? We have not added any tabs or spaces or anything, but the browser saw that, hey, this is the definition list, this is the term, and this is the definition. Let's structure it in a way that it makes sense, right? So again, markup language is a language where we use special characters to structure, along with the content, to structure it in a particular way. And that's what we are seeing all over here. If it's H1, it looks in a different way. If it's H2, it looks in a different way. Paragraphs are rendered differently. And all this is because we are saying, hey, this is a paragraph, this is a list, this is an unordered list. So we are structuring our data as we go. Next in our list is, not list, we have done all the list, but next is formatting text. So we can format some text. We can format text using some HTML elements, although it's recommended that we use style sheets for a lot of formatting, but I can still show you some things. So we can say we are learning HTML now. We'll learn CSS later, right? So let's say we want to emphasize that we are learning HTML now. We are going to be strongly say. So we do it like this. And if you see on our rendered web page, HTML is now in bold, right? So this is another example of nesting HTML elements. So we nested elements for our lists where we had ordered list and unordered lists, right? Here we have a new element called strong, which we have nested in the paragraph element. We can also emphasize on later by using this new element called em, right? Just surround the word later by it. And again, if you see, the later is in italics, right? So these are a couple of examples on how we can format our texts as we go. But like I said, once we go through CSS, we'll learn more about formatting, more about fonts, and CSS provides a lot more options to do this over here, and it's a more recommended way to do. Next, let's start adding some media, right? Let's add an image to our page. So to add an image, we have a HTML element called img, which is short form for image, right? And we pass a source attribute to it, src, which basically points to where we pass the path where the image is there, right? So it can be a local path, it can be something in our in our same server in the same directory, or it could be something remote. So let me quickly search that. You know what? Let's do this. Instead of downloading something, I'll show you this. So there's this web service called dogs API. Dog API, dogs.eu. Yes. This web service, it gives you random dogs images that you can add to your page for testing. It's an open source API, right? And what you can do is you can, let's say you want to have this dog's image on your web page. You see this JSON over here, just copy this URL. If you paste it over here, okay, so this is a dog image. Let's add this to our web page, right? I'm going to add this dogs API over here as well. So sometimes when you want to create a web page and you want to try how, let's say, a web page with 10 different images and style it in a way just to practice, you can use these APIs to add images without worrying about downloading images and then copying it and then making sure they are of the same size, things like that. So I add this source over here and tada, if you see on the right, it already rendered our dog API, right? I'm going to also show you the web page over here. See, we already have the dog page over here, but now it's too big for the page, right? We want a smaller version. So how do we do that? HTML attributes to the same. So we added the source attribute, right? Again, you see image is another HTML element that doesn't have a closing tag, right? So we can control the width and height of this image by typing width equal to, let's say, 150, right? And you might have already seen, hey, it decreased the width. And that's it. You can also control the height. You can also say height 150, right? Or you can say height. I think it looks better now, but you can also decrease the height and smoosh the dog if you want. But this looks better. So now if you hover over the dog, okay, let's say our server is down, right? Let's say this dog API is not available. So when you render the page, it shows like this. Now this doesn't look good, right? So this can happen that your image doesn't get rendered when, let's say, the image is not present, or the image server is down, or maybe the internet connection is slow and it takes time for the browser to get the image from the server, right? So in order to give a better experience in such a time, what you can do is you can say, you can add alt text saying this is an amazing, if I can type, dog. I don't know why it's jumping up and down. Let me close this preview. This is an amazing dog. Now if you go to the web page, if you see down here, our image did not load, but it says this is an amazing dog. So at least the viewers will have some idea on what's going to be rendered there. Now if we fix the URL, if you go there, the image loaded and the alt text went away. So alt text, basically alt stands for alternative text. So it's a text that gets displayed in case the image does not get rendered. There is another attribute for images called title. This is my dog. So what this title says is, if someone hovers over the image, it gives you more info about the image. Same as the title of a web page that gives you some info about the web page. The title of the image will give you some info about the image. So if you hover over it, now it says this is my dog. I wish I could zoom and show you. I'm not able to. Let's see if we can see now. Looks better. So it says this is my dog, right? Now let's think about accessibility, right? So accessibility is when a disabled person, right, who cannot maybe see clearly, tries to use our website. So they use these special tools to read our website, right? For example, they use screen reader to go through our website. So we need to provide some additional info to the screen reader to tell what this is about, right? How would we do that? So one thing we can do is we can provide caption. So we can say, right, we can say there's going to be a figure here, right? We can close this and we can add, this is the figure, and we can add a caption for this figure, and we can say image of an amazing dog. So what happens is, when the screen reader comes across this, it reads the caption for the viewer, and the viewer knows what's there in this web page. So now if you go there, if you go to our web page, you'll see it added the caption over here. So this is always a good practice. So whenever you are creating a web page, always remember that the people visiting your web page may have certain disabilities that prevent them from viewing the web page as it is. So you want to make sure your web page have the right contrast, they have the right tags, they have the right metadata information to help them view the web page. And we are going to again cover all that as we go further, as we create more practical examples, right? So this is a figure. What else can we add? Let's add a video, right? We are in media section. Let's add a video. And the video is also similar. So let's see, in the video, we need to add a source, right? First of all, let's download the video file. So in order to download the video file, there's another link that I'll share with you. This big bug bunny. I have no idea how this came across, but there are a lot of, whenever you see a video example, of a video player or example of quality of a video, you might end up seeing the same video. So I already have it downloaded. So I copied the video. If you see, it's over here, right? Let's uncomment our code again, right? In the source, we are going to give, you might have guessed, source, and we are going to say this particular video, right? Let's go to our web page. Go here. So you already see there's this huge video player over here, right? But there's nothing playing. Why? Because we need to add more more attributes to this. So here we'll add an attribute called controls. So now we are seeing a different type of attribute over here. So till now you saw that each attribute had a key like source and a value like the path of the source, key, width, and the value 150, key, alt, and the value amazing dog. But this is the first attribute where we don't have the value. So these attributes are known as Boolean attributes. So Boolean attributes are either true or false. So if the browser sees that there is a control attribute, it knows that we have to show the control. If there are no control attributes, then it doesn't show controls. So we just add controls. And if we go back to our web page, if you see here on the lower left corner, we have the play button. When you play on it, there you go, the video is playing. But this video player is too big, right, for our page. So let's do that. Let's see if we can set the width and height of this video. You see width 150, height 150, maybe, I don't know. Let's see how, I don't know, this might look ugly. Yeah, this looks very ugly. So width, let's do 350, right? This looks good. On the lower left corner, if you see, we have the video, and you have all the controls, right? You can pause it, you can make it full screen if you want, right? Let's add more controls, let's add more attributes, right? So let's say we don't want to click on play, we are too lazy, so we can say, hey, autoplay it. But if you see, I didn't do anything, it just started autoplaying. Next we can say, hey, I don't want to hear the sound, so I say muted. When you start the player, just say muted. Now if you see, our sound is automatically muted and it started playing the video for us. Alright, let me pause this, and that's how you can add a video. I'm going to comment this code out because I don't want it to play video and render video every time I refresh the page. And comment to play video. So this is again an example of how comments work. You can make some changes, you can comment on why you are making the changes. So maybe the future version of you or the next developer that comes in after you looks at the comment and he understands what we did and why we did, right? All right. Next, what can we add next? Of course, the main thing in a web page, right? One of the main thing is links, right? So let's add some links. So the links in web page are known as anchor tags, right? And they are represented by an element called A. So this is again a conventional element which has an opening tag and a closing tag. And we can add content to it, which says what the link should say. And we have to add an attribute telling where this link should tell us, right? So that attribute is href, right? And we'll say, hey, it says hello world, take me to hello world.html, right? So this link basically refers to this hello world.html page, and this is the text that it displays. Let's go back to our web page, and if you see on the lower left corner, we have this new hello world link. So if we click on it, there you go. It took us to the hello world.html web page, right? But let's explore some more attributes. So this is one attribute that defines where to go. There's another attribute called target, which says where to open this page. You can say target blank. So now if you go back to the page, when you click on the link, it will open the link on a new page. Yes, you need to refresh the page after saving, but yeah. So if I click on hello world, it opens a new tab over here. If you see, there are now two tabs. One is the hello world HTML, and there's my first web page, right? What else? So depending on your href, your links can behave differently. So let's say I want to add a link telling people to email me, right? So this is the content. This is what the web page will look at, and then we'll structure it. So we'll say, hey, when someone clicks on it, instead of opening a web page, I want you to mail to, let's say, Garang at example.com, right? So here, this mail to defines what happens with this link, right? If you go back to our page, if you refresh, you see we have added this new link called email me, right? This one. If we click on it, instead of opening a web page, it opens this email client. So I have not configured this, but ideally it will open an email client, and it will open a compose window of that client with the email address filled in. So it's just a useful attribute, a useful thing for your website, right? You can change the attribute values to change the behavior of the link. Right. Next, so far, if you see, we covered all the text-based HTML elements, right? On how to display text. How about how do we collect text, right? So let's create a new HTML page, and let's call it my details.html. And basically, we will use this page to collect user info. So we are going to create an HTML form over here. So I'm going to take a shortcut. I'm just going to use the VSCode's inbuilt template to just pre-fill everything for me, right? Instead of title, I'm just going to say HTML form, right? And we'll add a header tag, saying HTML forms. And in our index, we'll just add another link. We'll add href, and we'll say details.html, and we'll say HTML form, right? So now if you see in the bottom corner, we have three different links. Click on HTML forms, it takes us to the forms HTML. So how do we create an HTML form, right? So for that, HTML provides us a form element, right? So anytime you want to collect input from the user, you create this form element, and all the details that you want to collect goes inside this form element, right? So let's start with input, right? And I gave away the secret. Let's start with name, right? So if you want to collect the name, there is a HTML element called input, and if you see it, it's again the type of element that doesn't have a closing tag, right? And it already pre-filled a type for us, says type text, which tells the browser that, hey, this is input of type text. So if you see here, we have our HTML form and it already added a text box for us. And you can enter anything you want over here, right? But this is not clear. We are not sure what we are collecting here, right? So let's add a placeholder. So basically placeholder attribute sets the placeholder value for that form. So it sets the value that you want to display before someone fills in the form. So we can say, please enter your name, right? So now you know, oh, I need to enter my name over here, right? So it's not the actual form, but when I type, it goes away. Right? So when it comes to forms, it is very important that we give the ID attribute, right? Because especially with forms, you will see that there are a lot of use cases where we want JavaScript to validate the value of the form. And for that, JavaScript will need to access the form elements, right? And that's where ID comes into picture. So you can say ID, and like I said, these IDs need to be unique. So I can say name, right? Or let's say first name, first underscore name. There cannot be any spaces in the ID. So you can use underscore. You can use you can end it with the number, and you cannot start with the number, right? The first name. The second important element is the name. So this attribute basically uniquely identifies the field and sends this info to the server whenever you submit the form. So it's not important for the client side, but on the server side, you use the name value to identify what value did the user enter for this particular field. So it's the name of this field. So this can be same as ID, first underscore name. Again, these attributes do not affect the way the fields are rendered, but these attributes are mainly related to how do we access this field on client and how do we access the field on server. So if you want to remember, ID is something that we use to access the field on the client by JavaScript and CSS. A name is the attribute that we use to access the field on the server, right? And we'll see how we send this data to the server. We want to add a field called label. Now, whenever it comes to HTML fields, labels are very important because again, applications like Screen Reader use labels to identify what this field is, and they help people with certain disabilities to understand our forms better and fill in them accurately, right? So the label field basically gives a label to the field that we just described. So let's call the label first name, right? And we need to tell the label which field is this for. So we have a attribute called for and this. So basically here this first name refers to the ID field, ID attribute of the input. So whenever you are using Screen Reader, whenever the user clicks on the field, the label will read out first name and tell the user that you need to enter your first name over here. Okay. Sorry. Next, let's add another field. Let's add, right? Let's add password. Okay, we'll complete this. Okay, we'll add input type password, right? And let's add attributes to it. Let's say ID, password, let's say name, password, right? And let's say for equals password. So what are we doing here? First of all, what we are doing is we are typing the wrong element. All right, it's label, label. Okay, so we first let's talk about this, right? We created an input field And here we are saying that this input field is of type password. Earlier we had said this was input of type text. We are saying now it's input of type password, right? We are giving it a unique ID called password. We are giving it a new unique name called password. And what the difference is, since we said that this is of type password, the browser knows that this is supposed to be secure. We cannot display the values here. So if you see, if I enter the values here, the browser automatically converts it into dots or asterisks depending on the browser, but it does not reveal the values we are entering here, right? So again, this is the structural attributes saying how to render this field, right? So that is password. Let's add one more field, right? So we added your name, your password. I know this is a weird field where we add first name and password, but that's okay. Let's add a text area. So what does a text area do, right? So basically anywhere where you want to add more details, like a paragraph of details, whenever you want to accept such input, you create a text area. So let's see, let's call it description. We'll give in the same ID. Like I said, it's okay to give in the same ID as the ID and name can have the same value, but just remember which one is referred where, right? We can say, okay, it's 30 rows and 30 columns. Basically, these rows and columns define on how big the text area is going to be. Let's 10 was good, I guess, right? And let's also add this. So there's an element called BR, right? It's a line break. So if you see here, earlier there wasn't enough gap between text area and these elements. So line break, what it does is it just introduces a blank line between two elements. Now, again, I wouldn't say this is the right way to add spaces in the elements. You want to use CSS to do that. But for now, since we don't know how to do CSS, we are just going to use that. But just remember, this is just to learn, but this is not a best practice. Ideally, we want to use margins or paddings, depending on the use case, to add gaps over here, right? So this is a text area. You can add details. Hello, I am a software engineer by day and a gamer by night. Right? You can add description over here. Next, let's add some survey details. So let's add a simple question. Are you enjoying this video? Right? And it's going to be a yes no answer. So we are going to say, again, we want an input, right? We want of type, this time we are going to say radio, right? We are going to say ID is yes. Name, here we want to be careful, is enjoying, right? And we are going to add label for this, right? And we are also going to add a value. Value is yes. And I'm going to explain this in a while. Just give me a second. Label, right? For let's say yes. And yes. Oops. If I can type, same way, let's create another one, and we are going to change the ID to no. Enjoying, no, for no. Okay, so what did we do here? Let's change the label here, no. So yeah, what did we do here? Basically, and let's also add a line break over here so it's nice and clean. Yeah, basically what we are saying is we added this paragraph to ask a question. We created a new input of type label, right? Of type radio. right? We gave it a ID and we gave it a name enjoying, right? And its value yes, right? And then we added a label to it. Same way we created another radio button, gave it a different ID but the same name. Now why did we do that? So normally the way the radio button works is you can only click one of them at a time. The radio button is like a switch. You cannot select more than one at a time, right? So you want to make sure that the value of this radio button is associated with the same name. That's why for the value yes, we gave the same name enjoying. Same way for the value name, we gave the same name enjoying, right? The ID is different because these are two different input fields, and we need that because we want to make sure we point the label to the right field, right? So here it says this label yes is for this particular input and this label no is for this particular input, right? Now what would happen if we gave it a different name? Let's say I give it this enjoying underscore 1 and we gave this enjoying underscore 2, right? So now I can click yes, I can click no, I can click both of them, but that doesn't make sense, right? Either you are enjoying the video or you are not enjoying the video. So for radio buttons, you want to make sure you give the same name and only then they will work as expected. And again, you can add multiple such radio buttons. So let's say I want 3. You don't have to limit it to 2. So you say maybe, right? ID is maybe, this is maybe, this is maybe, this is maybe. So now you have 3 options. Are you enjoying? Yes, no, maybe. Right? You can switch between these 3, but you can only select one at a time. So next, let's say we can ask another question in our survey. Is this video useful? Right? And instead of radio button, we are going to do checkbox. So we are going to say input type. We are going to say this one is checkbox, right? And again, we'll add all the values. We'll say ID and we'll say CB underscore yes. Again, we want to make sure we don't add any spaces in ID or names, right? So we say CB underscore yes because even ID needs to be unique, right? We want to say name equal to useful, oops, right? And value equal to useful. Let's add a label for this label and we say useful, right? And we say, hey, this label is for CB underscore yes. Why does it say userful? Useful, right? Again, this shouldn't be a multi. Let's change this, right? Let's make it somewhat useful. And we'll add another page line break over here. And we'll add, again, doesn't make sense, but we'll just say very useful. What do I do this? CB very useful. I want to make sure, I think I changed my mind in between, but let's say useful so that it matches overall everything, right? Right? Now it makes sense. Very useful. So the thing with checkboxes, you can select multiple checkboxes at a time, right? In this case, we have different names because you can have values for each checkbox, right? So if you do this, it doesn't matter, but ideally you want to, the checkbox basically says whether this particular value is selected or not, right? So what this says is very useful is selected, useful is not selected. Again, we'll see once we go to submit button, we'll see how this network call actually happens, but just something. Next, let's create a drop-down list. So what drop-down list is, it shows a list and you can select elements from that list, right? So let's add again a paragraph and say, what do you want to learn next? You can add a select, right? So the select element tells the browser that this is going to be a drop-down list. And if you see, it has already rendered a drop-down list over here. And how do you give options into the drop-down list? You say option. Before we add an option, let's just add an ID. Learn next, just as a best practice. Right now we are not doing any JavaScript, but we still want to add ID as a best practice, right? So we'll give it topics, where we're going to add list of topics over here. Same way, names. Name is again topics, right? And for option, we are going to say what is the option and what is the value for it, right? So let's say we want to learn CSS because we don't have any choice. And we'll say value CSS. Let's say we want to add option JS and value JS. Oops, JS. So now if you see on the right, it already rendered this drop down for us, and you can select any one of them, right? But if you see it, let's say, let me save this. When you refresh the page, it has CSS selected, right? So one thing you can do is you can add another option, then say value default and say select one, right? So this is a more user-friendly way of saying that, hey, select one of these, and it's not selected by default, right? You want to make sure that you want to differentiate between user selecting something and something that's already selected. But let's say there are multiple options. Let's say there's one more option saying, oh, I want to learn Node.js, right? And you want to say that, hey, I want one of them to be selected. So by default, the browser always selects the first one. The first one is also always selected here, but you want to say, hey, maybe JavaScript should be selected by default. So you can add an attribute over here saying selected. And now if you see, JavaScript is always selected by default. So now we have a drop down with bunch of options and you can select any one at a time. Let's say we have a requirement that, hey, we want to have multiple options, right? You want to learn multiple things at a time. How would you do that? So let's just copy this, right? Let's just create a new paragraph. And let's say, what do you want to learn next? Please select multiple. Okay. And all you have to do is you have to say multiple over here. That's it. So now your drop down has expanded to this, and you can press Ctrl and select multiple over here. So let's change this to say multiple topics, right? And let's say we want to add a couple of more. Let's say we add Golang. So now we don't want to show all of them together, right? We want to hide some of them. So what can we do? So we can say size and we can say 2. So what this does is it only shows 2 at a time, but you can still scroll down and then select more. So I can select CSS and I can select Golang, right? So sometimes you might have a longer list where you might have a lot of options and you don't want this whole thing to just show up. So that's how you can do. Finally, let's see how would we submit this form, right? So we can create a button. Again, the element is simple. It's called a button, right? And you can say of type, and there are multiple options over here. So in this case, let's just say it's a regular button, right? And oops, you can close it and you can say, hey, click me. Oops, see daisies. Click me. So let me add this thing over here, or maybe I can just add a line break. I don't like adding line breaks, but let's just add it. Since we are here, we'll just add 2 of them to make it look good. Okay, so you saw, right? The buttons click me, but when you click on it, nothing happens. There's a reason. We didn't tell the button what to do when you click, right? So this button has all these methods, all these additional attributes. I wouldn't say method, additional attributes that we can define to tell it to, and that we can define and say what to do when something happens. So let's say we want to do something on click. So you can define, hey button on click. Just do this. If you don't understand that, that's okay. This is related to JavaScript, which we haven't covered right now. But basically, we are telling the button that when someone clicks you, alert hello. And how does this work? So let's go to web page, refresh the page. So we have a click me button. If you click on it, a browser alerts hello, right? So this is JavaScript. The alert part is from JavaScript, which tells the browser to send an alert message to the window, right? We are going to cover that in detail going forward, but that's how you would configure a button. Next, let's add another button of the type reset. And you might have guessed what this button does, right? So we have the reset button. Let's add password. Let's add, this is awesome, right? I am enjoying this video. It's somewhat useful or very useful. Now what reset does is, like the name suggests, it resets the form. You click on it, it clears the form for you, right? It's the button of type resets, and it only resets the form you are part of. So this button is in this form, and that's why when you click on reset, it resets all the elements in this form. Finally, let's say, so what is this form useful for, right? Let me just define this real quick. Okay, so basically, whenever you fill this form, you want to send this info to a server, right? And the server will take this info, save it to the database, or send it as an email, or do something with this form field, right? So how do you do that? So to do that, you create a button of type submit, right? And this tells the browser that whenever someone clicks on this button, you submit this form, right? You send this info to the server. But where would it send, right? We don't have a server, so there should be some default settings, right? Let's see. So we went here, we refresh. Okay, we have this form over here. Now, how do we check what would happen when you click on the button, right? So we'll go to our inspect developer tools. We'll make sure we are in the right view. And if you remember, we had seen this network tab where we were seeing all the network calls happening from our web app. We'll click on that network tab. So basically, anytime your web app makes a server call to get an image, to get a file, or anything, we can see it in the network tab. Just to give it a sample, let's refresh this. And if you see, it loaded this details.html page for us. And we can also look at a better example. Let's go to wikipedia.org, right? Let's go to inspect. Let's open network. So right now the network tab is empty because we didn't reload the page, or we didn't load the page while this is open, right? So now click on English, and if you see here, right, all these requests, main page, load.php, all these requests were made by the browser. So what happened was, when the server came with the browser, let's see, we can also see the source code, right? So we'll go to elements, we'll go to head, we'll zoom in, okay? We'll go to head, and now we see, hey, we are seeing all these things, right? So if you see here, there are script tags. Again, I don't want to open it to confuse you guys, but let's start with this. Here we have a link tag. Remember what link does, right? It links and defines a relationship between a resource and this page. So if we have a link tag, it says, hey, the relationship to this page is the style sheet, okay? And it has a URL. So it basically loads this page. It makes another call, another URL call, same way we do when we first open the browser and enter wikipedia.org, and gets the style sheet for this page. Same way, there is a meta property, right, which loads an image for this page. So all these things are defined in the header. There are also stuff defined in our, let's see if we can find an image tag somewhere. Maybe we won't, but all these URLs are defined in the page. And if you see, it's making all these calls over here. So if you see this is a request URL for this presidential campaign ad.webpage.jpg. So it's an image file. Same way it requested an image file for Shane Warne. So it made all these requests to the server and got the image and then rendered on the page. So when you make one browser call, when you open a URL once, after the server returns with the response, it makes multiple calls to get rest of the details. So first it gets the HTML, then it says, hey, give me this CSS, hey, give me this image, hey, give me this JavaScript file, hey, give me this text file. It starts communicating with the server, gets all the details, and then renders the page for you. So that's how you can use the network call. So coming back to our example, we should see the network call when we submit our form, right? Let's see what the default value is. So I'm going to say, I'm going to enter Gaurang. I'm going to say password hello world. This is awesome. I'm going to select yes to this. I'm going to select somewhat useful, very useful. I'm going to select CSS, right? So click like JS. When you click on this button, it clears the network tab. Let's clear it so we can start fresh, and then we click on submit. Ooh, what is this? Look, we have our call. Let's click on it. Let's go to headers. Then we'll see the request URL. So if you see the request URL, we are submitting the form to this particular page, to details.html. And if you see, we are passing all the form details over here. We are saying, hey, name is Gaurang, password is hello world, description is this, enjoying is yes, very useful, equal to CB, very useful, topics is CSS, multiple topic is JS, right? So all the form things we filled out, it did a call to the server. It submitted the form to the same URL where we created the form out, and it passed all the values with the name and the value. So now you understand where the name attribute that we added here comes, right? This guy. So now on the server, you can write a code saying that, hey, whenever you get this URL, read the name, read the password, read these details, and do something with it, right? And if you remember, in our previous video, we covered anatomy of the URL. We said that these things what we see here, first name, password, etc., is our query parameters, right? So these query parameters are used by the server for some kind of business logic. So that's how this info is collected, right? This is not complete. We can still configure the forms. We can say, let's say we can say target, and we can say my service something, right? We can ask the form to submit to a different URL than the URL it is on. We can say method is get. Again, we are going to cover all this in details, get, post, etc. We can also say autocomplete. We can say autocomplete off. So what this does is, if you remember earlier, let me turn this. If you remember earlier, when you clicked on it, the browser autocomplete kicks in, right? If we don't want that to kick in, if we want the users to fill in the details themselves, we can say, hey, autocomplete off. Now if you go here, the browser autocomplete won't fill in. So again, target, method, everything we are going to cover in detail when we reach the JavaScript part. But basically, this is how we create a form. We can collect user data, right? And that is it. That is the introduction to webpage. It doesn't cover all the tags, right? It doesn't cover all the HTML elements. There's so much there that I can't create. I can create like 4 or 5 videos and cover them all, but it would be more interesting to learn them when we start creating more practical examples. This is just a brief introduction on what is HTML, what are HTML elements, how do they work, how can you get started, how can you debug them, how can you create a basic web page. But you saw that this web page, it works, but it doesn't look amazing, right? And the reason for that is we don't have any styles yet. And that's what we are going to cover in next video. In the next video, we are going to cover CSS. We are going to cover how to import them, how to style your web pages, how to add animations. So next video is going to be super exciting, right? As far as HTML is concerned, we covered quite a lot of basics. There are many more fun elements that we are going to look into in future. There's a HTML element called canvas, which is heavily used for browser-based games. But I want to cover it once we also understand CSS and JavaScript, because they all are heavily linked. There are HTML tables. There are HTML other form elements like form upload, things like that. So we'll cover them as we go through use cases, as we make more practical examples. But I really hope what we covered today was helpful, and I really hope you learned something. If you did, please let me know in the comments. If you did not, if you found something confusing, please feel free to ask your questions there. I'll go through them and try to clarify them, try to create more videos clarifying them. And hopefully this helps you start your career in web development. Next video is going to be a CSS. So I'm really hoping that I'll see you there. Till then, adios, take care and stay safe. Bye guys.